Hey, next on the T Nation, thank you so much for coming back and listening to part 2 of this week's show, featuring my conversation with 9-time winner Tom Purtzer. Tom has always been known for having one of the all-time great swings in our game. This is the 9th time that I've had the privilege to sit down with Tom and pick his brain about different things. And this time around, we'll talk about what's going on within the game and the situation, obviously, between the PGA Tour and LIV. We'll talk a little bit about that. We look a little bit ahead to 2026 and what I feel like is the shrinking of the game at the pro level. We'll hear Tom's thoughts about that. We also go back to 1978 and hear his memories of playing in the PGA Championship up in Pittsburgh at Oakmont. And then we look at later on in his career, because he had his best year out on tour in 1991, 18 years after he joined the tour. He won a couple of times that year. He won at the Texas Open at Colonial. We'll hear about what he really enjoyed about that win. Not only getting the win, but the byproduct of that win, I think, also was very special to Tom. And we also get into his victory at the World Series of Golf. So thankful to have Tom back as part of the show. So sit back, relax, let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next 45 minutes or so. But before we get into all of that, I want to remind you about our friends over at 2 Under. 2 Under men's performance briefs are the unofficial underwear of the PGA, Ryder Cup, and President's Cup teams, and are sold in over 3,000 golf pro shops and golf specialty retailers nationwide. Ricky Fowler is their global ambassador, and over 50 other PGA, Korn Ferry, and Champions Tour players wear them. Just to mention a few, they are David Toms, Jerry Kelly, Justin Thomas, William McGirt, Scott McCarron, and Chris DeMarco. The Joey Pouch technology provides the ultimate male asset management, delivering maximum comfort from the tee box to the boardroom to the bedroom. Go to 2under.com to check out the bundle specials that offer substantial discounts for being a Next on the Tee listener. That's the number 2, UNDR.com. 2 Under, performance in your pants. Coming up next, Christopher Carter is going to make a return visit to the show. He's got a wonderful new book out that's going to help us have more fun when we're out there playing on the course. Before I bring him into the show, let's talk about our friends over at Squares Golf. And folks, do you sway and you're off balance in your golf swing? You know what? It could be your shoes. A golf shoe needs structure to provide stability and reduce sway. How can you tell if your shoes lack structure and are hurting your game? If you can hold your shoes by the toe and heel and twist it, toss it. Squares was designed for the perfect balance of structure and comfort. Isn't it time you tried Squares? Try the new Speedbolt at squares.com. That's SQAIRZ.com.
Sure, this is golf, but so is this. And this. And this is definitely golf. And so is this. Hey, that's not golf. Oh, wait, yeah, it is. And no matter what your golf is, you're gonna need a store. No, a superstore. A place to get fit for a new club and walk out with it the same day. A place to find the perfect fit. A place to do whatever this is. Because this is golf. And this is Golf's Superstore.
Okay, now back in Next on the Tee with me is another PGA Tour legend, Tom Purtzer. As you guys know, Tom is absolutely one of my all-time favorite people, let alone guests on the show. He's come to mean a great deal to me over the years. He's been a fantastic guest every single time he has been a part of the show. And tonight is the 9th time I've had the privilege of getting to spend some time with Tom. Let me remind you a little bit about his background. He's from Des Moines, Iowa, played his college golf at Arizona State from 1970 to 73, turned pro later on that year in 73, and got his first tour victory at the 1977 Glen Campbell Los Angeles Open, defeating Lanny Watkins by a stroke. Tom won 5 times on the PGA Tour, 4 more times out on the Champions Tour. In all, he has 15 professional wins. He's always been known as having one of the all-time great swings, and it's a huge thrill for me to get to say that he is back with me again this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Tom, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Chris. Always nice to be on your show.
I appreciate you. I think you were listening in a little bit in the last segment. David Graham wanted me to pass along a hello to you and how much he thought of you as a person and as a player. So hope you got an opportunity to listen in a little bit of that.
I did, and David was always one of the, when you first come out, you get you're not sure how you're treated. And David always treated me great, and I certainly appreciated that. He's always been a first class guy, a total gentleman, and for sure one of the best final rounds of any Open there at Marion. I didn't realize. I thought he hit all 18 fairways and all 18 greens, but that was one of a kind uh, last round. So, but I'm disappointed to hear that he's not one of the guys that got any of that the funding. That's ridiculous. He's one of the most underrated players in golf history. To have his record and the tour not acknowledging that is really sad.
Yeah, it's really sad, and I'm shocked, to be honest with you, to think a guy could go out and win it as often as he did around the world, and then add a couple of majors to that on the PGA Tour when he started playing over here. I don't know, Tom. I can't imagine a guy having a much better resume for what he accomplished in the game of golf than David Graham did. I mean, again, he's a World Golf Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know what does it take to get some fun.
Right.
That's ridiculous. He did, and Tony, and yeah, I just don't. I don't know. I'm not sure. I kind of get the leadership that the tour has these days. I don't understand it.
Yeah, me either. And speaking of that, that segues perfectly into what I wanted to start off talking to you about, because you played the majority of your career when Dean Beeman was the PGA Tour commissioner. And I've asked several of your peers this question. You know, Jay Monahan has been telling us for nearly 2 years now that they're making progress with the merger and getting a partnership together with LIV Golf. And every time you turn around, you know, they've had great conversations and they're getting close, but nothing ever happens. But it takes me back to it, you know, before it all kind of splintered apart. If Dean Beeman was still commissioner, would we be where we're at today, Tom?
Absolutely not. Dean was a no nonsense guy. You know, for a number of reasons. He was, you know, not all the players, you know, enjoyed some of his decisions, but they were always best for the tour. And you know, I have great admiration for Dean in what he did, because he was not, a lot of it was not popular, like the TPC, the golf courses. He got pushed back from a lot of the big stars, and you know, look at him now. The TPC Sawgrass is one of the best courses ever, one of the best tournaments ever. So you know, my hats off to Dean and a lot of his decisions. I don't think we'd be in this mess if he was commissioner when this all came about. You know, and I think I've told you before. I you know, certainly Greg Norman is not. You know, if it hadn't been for Greg, I think the tour would have talked to him, to LIV. I think, you know, in the early 90s, I think it was 94, when he tried to take 40 of the best players and start a tour. You know, of course, he didn't have the $2.3 billion to fund it, but you know, I think that, and then the tours turned him down. I think ever since then, Greg's had an issue with the tour, and you know, and it finally, you know, he finally got enough money to where he has caused, you know, major problems. You know, I don't agree with Phil when he says that the tour is greedy and this and that. You know, they're trying to take care of more players than just Phil. And you know, it's disappointing, certainly disappointing where the state of professional golf is these days. I don't see how you can ever, how they'll ever get back together. You know, like you said, it's taken 2 years, and what's happened in 2 years? Nothing.
Right.
You know, we hear, like you said, we hear all the, you know, oh, we're moving along, this and that. Well, you know, it should have gotten done by now. And like I said, I don't know how it's going to get done. You know, you've told these guys that, hey, when you sign with LIV, you no coming back to the tour. And, I think Rory said it the other day. He said, we don't need these guys to come back. It's given a lot of young players who are going to make names for themselves. They're young and really good players. I don't see that the tour needs the guys from LIV. They made their decision, and I think they've got to live by it. And I'm disappointed. I'm surprised John Rahm went. I thought he would not, but and again, it's hard to fault the players because a couple $100 million is a couple $100 million. It's pretty hard to turn down. But I would think that a lot of those fellas are unhappy with their decision at this stage of the game. To me, LIV is a large corporate outing. Nothing about LIV is a professional golf tournament in my view. When you don't start on the first tee and you don't finish on the 18th hole, that's a big thing. And that's just my thoughts. But when going back to Dean, I honestly don't think that Dean would have done anything other than I think he probably would have tried to talk to him in the beginning to see where they're coming from. And I certainly don't think Dean would have. There's a lot of things that Dean would not have come up with. This social media paying all these players all this $50 million for social media. That's I don't understand that at all. Those fellas don't need any more money. And Dean was always about, getting what you deserved. If you played good, you made a lot of money. And I think that's what he was all about. He was a player, and he knew that's the whole thing in professional golf.
So, Tom, I want to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago and all the young players, because when you look ahead to next year on the PGA Tour, there's a lot of changes that are going to happen. The number of tour cards are being reduced down from 125 to 100. The number of tour cards awarded to Korn Ferry Tour players that are graduating, if you will, to the PGA Tour, that number is going down from 30 to 20. There's only going to be a couple of Monday qualifiers. There's only a couple of spots for that. The Q School cards are going to go down to only 5 players graduating from there to get onto the PGA Tour. Field sizes are going to go down from in the 150s to 120 to 144. To me, this feels like a huge overreaction to LIV so that the top players get to remain the top players and they get to have more money, because fewer players means that purse money is going to be carved up into larger slices for everybody. And where I get worried is those great young players, the Korn Ferry Tour players and the young players that are making their way, the grinders to make their way out onto the PGA Tour. Now we're going to shrink the PGA Tour, and I'm afraid those young players are going to get disenfranchised and go, you know what? Now it makes it easy for LIV to pluck those players to go play over there. I feel like in a time when we talk about growing the game at its very highest level, the PGA Tour is shrinking the opportunities to get out there. And I just don't, I'm concerned about that, Tom. I just don't think that's the right thing to do.
Well, I agree. The tours ran pretty good for, I don't know what, 40, 50, 60 years. I kind of don't have a problem with the 100. But as long as you get more young players, either off the school or Korn Ferry, to me, Korn Ferry should be the way to get on the tour. I think 30 players is, if anything, it's not enough players off the Korn Ferry Tour. Those young kids can really play, and it's they're making no money on that tour. But to me, that's the way that you ought to be able to get on tour. I didn't realize that they were cutting the tour school down to that few. And I totally don't agree with this, 70 having these elevated events where there's only 70 players and no cut. That's just a you know a reaction to the LIV tournaments when
Right.
it didn't need to happen. It was a mistake. I don't know. The tour administration to me is not going in the right direction. I'm kind of disappointed in the board. I'm kind of disappointed in, to Jay. I know he's got a tough job, but it doesn't seem like they're going in the right direction, and it's all because of LIV, trying to compete with LIV, and that you can never compete with LIV with the amount of money that they have behind them. You're not ever going to compete with them. You just got to try and get the kids to go, hey, I've dreamt since I was a little kid of winning, the Phoenix Open or the Los Angeles Open or whatever it is on the PGA Tour. To me, that's the key. You've got to make it so that they understand that the history of professional golf is the PGA Tour. It's not going to ever be LIV. And I think the young kids are seeing that. Obviously, when they're getting thrown out a whole bunch of money, and I'm a little disappointed in some of the managers kind of funneling them that way. That's not the best thing for a young kid's career. The PGA Tour is where it's at. It's not going to change. But I'm disappointed. Like the Phoenix Open, there's no Monday qualifying there anymore after this year, and that was a huge fundraiser for the section. And it's a way. It's a little itty bitty way for some young, superstar to get in the tournament. Boy, Mondays are, really hard to get, but a lot of those guys chase the Mondays. So I'm disappointed in there's not going to be a Monday. And I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm a little disappointed in administration.
Well, I couldn't agree with more with what you said there, Tom. I mean, to me, we're going to lose out on so many great stories. The Monday qualifiers that have gone on to win a golf tournament or contend in one, and the guys that have earned their way onto the PGA Tour after going through a number of Monday qualifiers and playing really well, and then establishing themselves. And the kids on the Corn Ferry Tour, to your point, I mean, to go down from 30 to 20 when it should be going the other direction. I don't understand that. I'm with you on the administration piece, and I guess on top of the fact that I have no faith in Jay Monahan, but to think that the player board now, the policy board, used to be more independent people versus players, and now that is flipped where there are more players than there are independents. You would think that the players would be fighting for other players, but it feels like they're actually fighting for themselves so I can get more money, and it's all about me and how much of the pie that I get instead of thinking about it at the tour global level. I just feel like they're going in the complete wrong direction, all because they're overreacting to LIV.
I can't agree with you more. That it's a total overreaction. They LIV bought some of the really good players. Well, okay, that's the way it is. You can't, there's no way that the tour can keep funding these elevated events.
Right.
And there's really not a need for it. And the other thing is, how about if you're I don't know, San Diego Open or whatever tournament it is, and you're not an elevated event, you're not going to get a primo cast of characters that week. So it's just, it's disappointing for those trying to run events when you're not going to be one of those, 20 events. There's 20, 25, 26 other events that aren't going to get that money and stuff. So, and I know they say, well, we're going to spread it around, every year and stuff, but, it just doesn't need to be that way. They were playing for a lot of money to begin with. in the tournament. So do we really need, do we really need to keep, the LIV, I mean, the elevated events where it's 20 million bucks. That's a lot of money that, that corporate sponsors have to come up with, the tour has to come up with. It's just, I don't know, it's nonsense.
Right.
But I'm in agreement with you. I'm kind of disappointed in the administration, kind of disappointed in the player board. I don't know. I don't understand how you can try and cut down the size of the fields. We've always played 144 until daylight savings time. Then you went to 156. So, you've got to look out for the tour as a whole, not just a certain percentage of the big winners. So,
yeah, agreed. All right, so Tom, let's switch gears a little bit. U.S. Open this year is back in my hometown of Pittsburgh at Oakmont. You played in the PGA Championship there in 1978. What do you remember about dealing with Oakmont?
I remember it was a really, really hard golf course. I just remember the par 3 is the 8th hole. It was like 250, 60 yards back in 78 when, we were hitting 3-woods and drivers to that hole. But I love the church pews. I thought that was awesome. I'm kind of disappointed in that I heard that they've taken all the trees down.
Yeah, they did.
Which is a little disappointing. My only one issue with Oakmont, I think it's a great golf course, but I'm not a big fan of greens that fall away from you. I think I remember the first green and the 10th green, both of them, and they weren't short holes, and you're hitting. It'll be different now because how far the kids hit it, so it'll be a little different. But I remember hitting long irons, mid to long irons into those par 4s, and the greens going away from you. And I thought that made the golf course extra tough. But it's a great golf course. They've had a lot of major championships on there, a lot of great winners. So I suspect it'll be a great Open. Yeah.
You had your best year on tour in 1991, 18 years after you joined the PGA Tour. You're 39 years of age in 91. You go out and win twice. You finished 4th on the money list. You had averaged 70th on the money list over the prior 4 seasons. What changed for you in 1991?
I think I just started believing in myself. I never did that before. I didn't really feel like I was, a top 25 player or I just didn't have the feeling that I was one of those guys that could, try and win tournaments and I was kind of content in finishing, 20th to 40th. And I think I just started believing in myself, and, I was never a really good putter. I felt like that was the thing that always held me back. And so, I was always, my brother, I've got an older brother, and he was a really good player, and he was a great putter, and all I ever heard when I was growing up was, man, if you could just putt like your brother. So then I guess I figured that I wasn't a very good putter. And, it's kind of funny how your mind works that. And we didn't have any sports psychologists back then. So I think I just started believing in myself, and I got started off that year in Tucson. Really should have won the Tucson Open. I made 6 on the last hole. Phil made a 3, and he beat me by a shot. So, that kind of got me started thinking that, hey, I played good when I was in the hunt. I played pretty solid, played pretty good, and thought, oh, I like this, And so I started believing in myself, giving myself more of a chance, and had a really good year winning Colonial, and then the World Series there in Akron at Firestone. So, I was in the mode of believing in myself, and then 92 comes, and the first week of the year, I injured my back, and really from that point on, I really wasn't as good as that year. So it was kind of disappointing that I got injured that first week in '92.
Tom, I want to talk about all three of those tournaments, starting off with the Tucson Open. 91 was the year that Phil Mickelson won as an amateur, fellow Sun Devil. He takes a title that you were right in contention with the whole week. What was it like going along and having this kid Mickelson edge you and Bob Tway by a couple of strokes?
I knew how good he was, kind of growing up around Phoenix and getting to watch him play college golf and stuff. And, everybody knew about Phil, how good he was, how good his short game was, and how good a putter he was. So it kind of wasn't you're always surprised that an amateur is even close to the lead coming into the last day. So it wasn't that big of a surprise, but it was. But he made a, I don't know, 18, 20 footer on the last hole for a 3. And, once he hit it on the green, for his second shot, I go, he's going to make that putt. And sure enough, he did. He's a talent of, that kind of a one of a kind talent, a little bit Tiger-esque, when Tiger was an amateur. Phil was pretty much that good.
You mentioned the win at Colonial. You were clearly in tremendous form that week. You tied Lanny Watkins early in the week for the winning the Pro-Am, and then in the final round, you shoot the low round of the day along with Dan Forsman. You both shoot 64. It leapfrogs you over David Edwards, Scott Hoke, and Bob Lohr to win by 3 strokes. But how big a win was that for you? Not only to win a golf tournament, but also win at a place where Mr. Hogan won 5 times on a course referred to as Hogan's Alley.
Well, the one thing I thought about was, hey, I get to sit next to Mr. Hogan at the Champions Dinner next year. That was probably the coolest thing I thought about on Sunday night after the tournament. But that's one of the great venues of the tour. It's you had to hit all kinds of shots. You used every club in your bag. Had to hit it right. Had to hit it left. It's just one of those golf courses that inspires you to play good, and a lot of it has to do with the history. That Hogan won, Byron Nelson. Just the names that have won there. It's incredible. And then just Colonial. It's one of the best tournaments on tour. Still is, always will be. It's a little tough now because of it's gotten with how far the kids hit it. It's a little bit at a disadvantage, but scores are still not super low there. But the fourth holes, or not the fourth hole, the fifth hole, that par 4 dog leg to the right is still one of the hardest par 4s that I can think of. But it's just I was very lucky, and also to play with Tom Watson in the last round was a huge win. He said some nice things to me on the 18th green, and that meant a lot.
Tom, one more before I let you go. And you mentioned earlier about winning the World Series of Golf at Firestone. Over the years, a lot of tournaments have vied for the title of being the 5th major. Nowadays, people talk about it in terms of the Players' Championship. I was talking with David Graham early in our conversation about the Australian Open once upon a time, perhaps being looked upon that way. When you win the 91 World Series of Golf, did you feel like at that time on the PGA Tour that was the tournament that was the 5th major?
Not really. I knew it was very prestigious a win, but if there's ever going to be a 5th major, it's going to be TPC. It's going to be the Players' Championship. That's on a great golf course, the best field all year. The World Series, I think, would we have 30, 40 players? But they're all world-class players. But to me, it was a special tournament for me because, like David said, he had a 10-year exemption. He won a tournament with 10 years. And it was huge for me because I was turning 40 that year, and I had a 10-year exemption that went along with that. So that was huge. It took me right into the Champions Tour. So it was and then, not knowing that I was going to be hurt for 4 or 5 years after that, it turned out to be a really, really, really big event. But, to win at Firestone is huge. It's one of the toughest golf courses that we play all year. And it just, again, it had a lot of history at Firestone too. So I just feel like I was very blessed to win on, those tournaments at Riviera, Colonial, and at Firestone.
Tom, before I let you go, how can our listeners stay up to date with all the things you're out there doing, whether it's real estate, whether it's lessons, or all the other things that you're involved with nowadays?
Well, I am a new real estate agent and still trying to learn that business. It's been a little slow, but it takes a while for it to get going. And I'm on I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook a lot. Unlike David, I like to chat with people. Like to chat with a lot of people. Have been fans for a while, and it's nice to get new friends on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. So I'm a little cyber challenged, so it takes me a while to get stuff done. But thank God I've got some young kids that can usher me through all the ins and outs.
And for people that are looking to buy a house, let people know where you're at and how they can find you.
Well, I'm in North Scottsdale. I'm at Russ Lyon, Sotheby's Russ Lyon in North Scottsdale. And boy, we've got a lot of great houses right now to show. So give me a call. I'll be happy to help you. It'll be fun.
There you go. Tom, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to come back and be a part of the show, like I said at the top, for a 9th time. I can't think of something that is more privileged on my behalf than to have gotten to spend 9 different evenings getting to spend some time talking with you.
Well, Chris, it's my honor. You have the best golf show ongoing. So it's a privilege for me to even be on your show once, but 9 times. I surely appreciate you inviting me back on. Thank you.
Absolutely, my friend. Take care. All the best to you and your family. I look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon.
Look forward to it, Chris. Thank you.
See you, Tom.
All right. Bye-bye.
That is the great Tom Purtzer, folks. Look, if you're anywhere near the North Scottsdale area, why wouldn't you buy a house from Tom Purtzer? I mean, for crying out loud, one of the all-time greats on the PGA Tour, a guy who had one of the great swings. And then again, he won 9 times between the PGA Tour and the Champions Tour, and a guy that is spot on, at least in my perspective, for as he looks around and all the things going on the PGA Tour today. I think Jay Monahan and the players and the folks that are there on the independent council need to be listening a lot closer to guys like Tom Purtzer. He's a legend in our sport, and he knows what's going on and how things should be. So hopefully they'll pay a little closer attention to a wonderful guy like him. Again, 9 times here on the show, a bigger privilege I have not had than to be able to say something like that. All right, my friends, it is time for me to put a bow on this week's edition of Next on the Tee. My sincere thanks go out again to Steve Shingeldecker, David Graham, and Tom Purtzer for joining me this week. Scheduled to join me next week are our resident director of instruction, Tom Patry, of course, will be here. We'll get our regular monthly visit from the confidence doctor, Dr. Bob Winters. Plus, our good friend and former PGA Tour pro, Jay Delsing, will be back. Jay's got a new book coming out. Can't wait to hear all about that. So it's going to be an amazing show, folks. I hope you'll come back and join us and be a part of it. I want to thank our friends again over at the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review for hosting this show on their site. For coverage of everything going on in Western Pennsylvania, including your favorite sports, go to triblive.com. You can find the show by then clicking on the Sports section tab, and you're going to find the most recent episode right there front and center on the homepage of the Sports section. Or you can click on Sports and then Podcast Network, and then you're going to see the Next on the Tee logo. Click on that, and many of the most recent episodes from this season are right there for you. You can also find the show over on Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Player.fm, and GolfNewsNet.com. And as always, my sincere thanks go out to the great folks over at Good Pods for making this show one of their recommended podcasts. So please download their free app and stream your favorite podcast right there on your favorite device. But like I say every week, most of all, my sincere thanks go out to all of you for being the greatest supporters in the history of podcasts. I appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.